You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Home Field Apparel.
Right up Meridian, baby.
Welcome to the Right Up Meridian podcast. I'm your host, Zion Brown, here on the Back Home Network. Of course, all of our Back Home Network podcasts are presented to you by Home Field Apparel. Go to homefieldapparel.com. Use code HOME23 for 15% off. Our good friends at Home Field. I saw they just released a bunch of corduroy hats for a lot of the college teams that they are licensed to. So if that's your thing, those corduroy hats, go ahead. Homefieldapparel.com. Use code HOME23. And for the end of the 2025 season, we'll do one last full-on fever episode here. I guess we have to, right? Anybody who watched this last game and this series against the Aces is interested in hearing about this team and just all the things that they went through and everything that we saw this season and the way that series ended. For those of you who really lost the best of 5 series in 5 games to Las Vegas, 107-98 was the final of Game 5 in overtime, as the Fever were right there, had a chance to get back to the WNBA Finals for the first time since 2015, a full decade ago. The first time Stephanie White was his team's head coach, but instead the Aces advanced and they are headed to play the Phoenix Mercury in the WNBA Finals. So that'll be an interesting series, but again, it starts with an injury. Whether it's for this Fever team or if you even want to link it, of course, with this being the Right Up Meridian podcast, want to link it with the Pacers. The link is right there. The best guard on the team, or at least the best guard on the team this year, Kelsey Mitchell, went through some cramping. I'm recording this on Thursday. She announced yesterday on Wednesday that she suffered from rhabdomyolysis. I believe I said that correctly. If I didn't, I apologize. But basically, her muscle tissue just completely broke down, releasing some harmful substances into the bloodstream. Extreme cramping, a very rare injury or diagnosis to face. And yeah, it was just so sad to see her go down like that in the third quarter. So it was so odd to see too. Like, once again, if we just want to compare it to something like Tyrese Halliburton, everybody knew Tyrese Halliburton came into those games, the last two and a half games of the finals, with his calf injuries, his calf strain. And so when he went down and then you see the replay, you kind of already knew, like, okay, this looks Achilles related. This is different. Obviously, if you were watching that game, Kelsey Mitchell had just been, on the court, going back and forth. She had hit a 3 the possession before, comes back down the other possession, down the court, coming off the screen from Aaliyah Boston. Aaliyah Boston is called for a foul on the screen. And then all of a sudden, you're like, we're looking at the replay, and then before we know it, they go back to live action on the court, or was about to be live action on the court, I guess. And Kelsey Mitchell was just on the ground out of nowhere. A very concerning and a very almost scary situation where it's like, what just happened? They brought out the stretcher for her that she did not actually end up getting on. And then ESPN has the reports of cramps and whatnot, just trying to figure out what was going on there. Holly Rowe doing her best from the sideline, but it's a scary situation. And for the season that Kelsey Mitchell just had, where she was, I'd say, probably the 4th best player in the WNBA, the incredible year that she just completed. We saw her, we talked about her, gave her praise. The last Fever episode we did after they had just beat the Atlanta Dream in Game 3, and Kelsey Mitchell was huge in that game. And she had 15 points. It's midway, late in the third quarter when she goes down. You're thinking, okay, she can get going here, 23, 25 points and finish with that much. Maybe this team does win this game and advances to the finals. But instead, her story for this 2025 season just ends there. And so for that, it was very sad to see. And then it looked like, as those last couple of minutes of the third quarter played out, Aaliyah Boston picked up her 5th foul on that screening play. It looked like, okay, this is it, right? Like, this team, without their best scorer, just won't be able to bounce back from that and really have a chance to win this game. But they just keep clawing and fighting. I love the move by Stephanie White. I know a lot of coaches may not have done this, but she put Aaliyah Boston right back in the game to start the fourth quarter, right? She saw the way that game was trending and just had the wherewithal, the recognition to say, hey, we're not we're not getting this done here if Aaliyah Boston isn't even on the floor. And so kudos to her for making that choice right down. Go into that fourth quarter trailing by 8 points, and you got a decision to make with Aaliyah Boston already having her 5 fouls, and Stephanie White just put it right back in there. I think that was the right move. And you saw this team was able to make its way back and work its way back into the game. And of course, Lee Boston does end up fouling out. I'll talk about that a little bit more later, more in depth, the fact that she fouled out. I will say straight up right now, I do disagree with that call. You're going for a rebound. I think the two players have the same right to the ball. It's not like Leah Boston is going over the back of Jackie Young trying to get that ball. I just don't agree with the way that was called. But I'll talk about the officiating and I guess all of the news in the WNBA a little bit more on a little bit in more depth later on. But it's a great season for the Fever, and I do want to shout out the fight that this team showed. Right, we talked about Odyssey Sims when they beat the Dream. Odyssey Sims again, 27 points and 6 assists in this game, just coming up huge. Realized once Kelsey Mitchell went down, kind of from a guard play perspective, at the very least, everything had to run through her. It was a lot of Odyssey Sims pick and rolls, right? Her and Aaliyah Boston, or maybe her and Tasha Howard, or B Turner, whichever one of those two was in the game at a certain point. And so Odyssey Sims stepped up and did it. She will be on a WNBA roster next year, right? I know they had to sign her to those hardship contracts, and she was on the Sparks to start this year, but got let go. Odyssey Sims is going to be playing in the WNBA next year. Whether it's for the Fever or not, who knows? They have a lot of decisions to make, right? They're going to have to make decisions on her, on somebody like Erin McDonald as well. Kelsey Mitchell will have to make a decision on if she wants to come back to the Fever, right? She's a free agent again after signing that just 1 year deal on that kind of core contract to return with the team. So that's its own thing. But at the end of the day, the Fever in that overtime were without their 2 stars. And even for most of the second half, I'll say they were without their 2 stars, while the Aces had their 2 stars, and the Aces' 2 stars were incredible. Asia Wilson, 35 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, 4 steals, 4 blocks. I don't think I need to say much more. Like, that is one of the most complete stat lines I can remember seeing in a closeout elimination game like that, game 5, when they needed it the most. And then Jackie Young, Indiana native. Honestly, Jackie Young has been my favorite player in the W for a good 4 or 5 years now. 32 points, 10 assists, which isn't really what you would think when you think Jackie Young, especially on that team. You're thinking, okay, Chelsea Gray is going to be the one to get 8 to 10 assists for us, but it was Jackie Young on this night, and then no turnovers to go along with that. So she was incredible. I honestly thought Jackie Young was going to make the little floater push shot she had at the end of regulation to win the game there. She kind of got the angle. I think it was Odyssey Sims who was guarding her, and I think she just kind of got the angle, and it just grazed off the front of the rim as she tried to bank that in. I thought she was just going to just hit that and send the Fever home there. It took an overtime period, and Vegas won that overtime period 21-12, and man, I can't even say the Fever did anything wrong. Like, through most of this game, the Fever, they were scoring pretty well and struggling to get stops on the other end. They had those 3 possessions in overtime where they guard extremely well for like 20, 22 seconds. And these Hail Mary, these prayer type of threes go in for the Aces, right? You got 2 by Chelsea Gray, the 1 by Joel Lloyd. And it's just like, man, you can't it felt wrong in a sense that the season ended due to those shots for the Fever, just because of the fact that they still were fighting, right? Even when their best player went down, they still kept fighting. Even when their best 2 players went down, they were still fighting and scratching and clawing to finally get to that point in the game and to get there in overtime where they're still scoring on one end and they're defending their butts off just for those, ridiculous shots. It's the fact that 3 of those shots went in. I mean, Chelsea Gray, Joel Lloyd, those are champions. Those are players that have been there. Those are players who, have been in moments like this. You get it if they nail one of those shots. It's like, okay, sometimes you just need your most experienced players to go get you a bucket. They hit 3 of them, and they were all threes. Anytime a team hits 3 threes in overtime, that's probably going to be it, right? Like, it's a 5-minute period, and that guarantees you 9 points to go on top of any other points you can get on other possessions, right? That's probably going to be it. And that was the problem with the Fever down the stretch too, especially once. It was a problem, I think, a little bit even just in general without Caitlin Clark on the floor throughout the season, but even especially once Kelsey Mitchell went down, there were no really threes for the Fever to shoot or to be had from outside. Looking at the stats right now, the Fever shot 1 3 in the fourth quarter, and it was made by Shea Petty. And in overtime, they got up 2 threes, both those threes came from Shea Petty. She made one. I think one of them was near the end where they just kind of had to force up a three. But yeah, 3 threes in 15 minutes of play. Not ideal. They only shot 17 threes on the game. 7 of 17, they shot 41%, but they weren't really generating those looks versus the Aces shooting 26 threes, and they also shot the ball extremely well, 42%. They made 11 threes. So, you get a team that takes 9 more threes than you do and shoots a better percentage. Most of the time, that's going to signal a loss for the Fever, and that's what happened. And again, I feel like that goes so much differently with Kelsey Mitchell in that game just because she's going to get up threes, and because she can create and dribble from the outside, she can also create threes for others in a way that really, no disrespect to somebody like Odyssey Sims or anybody else, but really nobody else on the court for the Fever could do that down the stretch of this game. So they were just at a disadvantage just from that alone, just the fact that they could not really get enough threes up, right? Once again, 3 threes attempted in 15 minutes. We just talked about the 3 threes that Aces made alone in the overtime period. I believe they shot 4 total in the overtime. And so it was just a clear discrepancy from there. But again, it's an incredible fight. One of the better runs I've seen, right? I know we just came off that Pacers run, but when you look at a team that basically lost all its guards besides Kelsey Mitchell, and of course, eventually losing Kelsey Mitchell, you're losing so much creation from the outside and had to just keep putting in new people. Shea Petty, Odyssey Sims, whoever it was. Ariel Powers got a little bit of burn. Not really a guard, maybe more of a wing, but she got a little bit of burn in this game 5, not a lot. But they just had to keep putting new people in there, and they had to fight and scrap and claw until the end. But at the end of the day, that game in Vegas, the Vegas Aces were able to go in there and win it. I'll go to the officiating because I know that has been the hot topic, I guess, in the WNBA over the last week or so. What I will say, I'm trying to figure out how to put this. What I will say is that the officiating wasn't good. In this series and the other series, the Mercury Link series, officiating refereeing was not very good, but it hasn't been for forever, basically for years at the very least. And so for me, I hesitate to blame a loss on the officials, to blame the Fever's loss on the officials, even to blame the Lynx loss on the officials. I know that's a whole other thing, and I am going to get to the Napheesa Collier statement and tweet that she gave at their exit interviews on Tuesday. I'm going to get to that here in just a moment, but it's hard for me to what I can't do when I know the officiating is bad is look at it and every time a certain team lose, blame the officials. I know some Dream fans were upset with the officiating in that first series, and then in this series, it felt like basically whichever fan base lost the game was blaming the officials. Right? And I saw from Fever fans, I saw Asia Wilson literally said something about it after Game 4, where she kind of critiqued Aaliyah Boston. I would have to assume this was on the court because this is not documented anywhere else. But I guess Aaliyah Boston on the court at some point during the series claimed that Asia Wilson had a special whistle, and of course Asia had something to say about that after Game 4 when Aaliyah Boston got to the line quite a bit. And so once again, there was just that back and forth there. But for me, there's some bad calls. Once again, I thought the Aaliyah Boston call was asinine, right? Like I'm watching this game and I see the Fever get the stop and Aaliyah Boston get the rebound. And in my head, there's no foul to even be seen, right? There's no way that this ball isn't going back to the Fever. This was when the game was tied near the end of regulation. I'm thinking this ball is going back to the Fever, and they have a chance to go win the game on the other end. Instead of foul, it's called. It's her 6th. She fouls out. Can't play in the last 20 or so seconds of regulation or in overtime. And that was just crucial. That was just vital. So I thought that was a terrible call. But again, I thought there were terrible calls both ways. I go back to the first half when Lexi Hull gets a whole hold of Jackie Young's elbow as she's going up for a 3-point shot. Sometimes you don't see those things in real time. In real time, I'm like, well, that was a foul. And then they show the replay when they get the next dead ball. And it's like, yeah, that's a clear foul. That should clearly be 3 Jackie Young free throws. And with the way that she played on Tuesday, probably would have made all 3, right? And so those are things that you may not think about. But there's several of those calls throughout the game going back and forth both ways where it's just like, what's going on here? Like, what are they doing? And so once again, the officiating was bad, but I don't think I can look at that and say that's the reason why this Fever team lost or why even necessarily the Lynx lost. Now, I know they had a different situation where you can argue that the officiating led or the laxness of that officiating maybe led to Napheesa Collier getting hurt, right? Where if Alyssa Thomas doesn't feel like she can get away with, the foul that she committed that wasn't called. If she doesn't feel like she can get away with that, maybe she doesn't even try to make that play, and Napheesa Collier doesn't get hurt. But I don't know. It's just hard for me when I know the officiating is so bad. Not all the officials, I won't say that, but many of the officials are poor, and I see that, and I'm looking at it. It's hard for me to say the bias against one team, or that's why one team is winning or losing this series. Once again, I just think the Aces were a little better, and the Fever were just so beat up that they weren't able to really get past the fact that they had lost Kelsey Mitchell there at the end. But I don't want to talk about Stephanie White at this point. I've given her some flowers these last few episodes, and it's so funny to me to see everybody, right? I saw Rick Carlisle shouted her out yesterday, and I've seen a lot of tweets and whatnot talking about the job she's done, which is so funny to see to me after it felt like for much of this season she was getting critiqued about rotations and this and that. And again, I came on here a few episodes ago and was like, hey, she lost her whole team, right? Or at the very least, she lost the team that she signed up to coach when she took this job. And so she's doing what she can with this team and to on the fly figure out ways for them to score still, right? It was so interesting because at times in that dream series, it was like, man, this team really can't score. But then you get to game 5 and it's like this team, all they got to do is get a stop or two. They weren't able to do that, but they were scoring, right? And I feel like that's even harder than figuring out defense on the fly, which, by the way, the times when they got stops came in that fourth quarter when they got back in the game and were playing that zone. They had Lexi Hull just kind of roaming the free throw line, basically trying to prevent any sort of easy catch for Asia Wilson. You saw in one of those possessions, in multiple of those possessions, but one of them that really stuck out, Jackie Young just did not want to drive left whatsoever. And so kind of playing to the tendencies of these players, of these star players, and trying to affect that Aces defense as much as they could. Once again, that's all Stephanie White to get a team of women who had barely even played together, to get them together and get them to play so connected and really together for a zone defense like that in the biggest stage of the year. Incredible to me. And also to find ways to score offensively, also very, very impressive. So I want to see what she does with this team next year. I don't want to do too many thoughts on next season as of right now, right? That might be a later on episode. It's because there's so much to sort out and figure out. But I'm curious to see once Caitlin Clark returns next year. I am assuming Mitchell will be back with this team, but we don't really know. And I'll talk about that in just a second. You get those two together. Of course, Leah Boston back, Sophie Cunningham. And again, I'm not sure what the rest of the guard room will look like, whether they're bringing Ari McDonald back, whether they want Odyssey Sims to stay on the team and whatnot. But you get all these players back next year. And Tasha Howard, I think, will be back. So, and it should be interesting to see how Stephanie White kind of takes what she learned on this team that was missing some of its key players, reintegrate some of those key players, and how she's able to build upon that. And we'll get into that more in the offseason when actual moves are made. But for now, once again, I just think she did a great job. I will make a finals pick here. I don't really have a strong pick here that I'm like, I absolutely believe is going to happen. I was so disappointed by the Aces in this series because it just felt like they should have won it in 4 games, right? And I say that when I say should have, I just mean just because of the team and the injuries that the Fever had, right? I just gave props to the Fever, but it just didn't feel like the Aces should have been in this series this tightly. And the same thing happened to them against Seattle. And I came on here with Tony when we picked the whole playoffs, and I was just like, I'm going to do it, right? They came into the playoffs from that, I believe, 16-game winning streak, 17 after they won the first game against Seattle. And I was like, okay, I think they're going to do it. I think they're going to beat the Lynx in the finals. Of course, funny enough, the Lynx didn't even make it there, which felt like a no-brainer, right? Which felt like it was absolutely going to happen, but they ended up losing to Phoenix. But I don't know. I want to pick Phoenix, but again, I've seen these Becky Hammon teams, whether you think she's a perfect coach or not, right? I don't think she is a perfect coach, but I do think she's a damn good one. And I look at Becky Hammon and her playoff track record to this point, having only lost 1 series now as this team's head coach now going in to the end of her 4th playoff run. I think they're going to do it. I say Aces in 6 here. I would love if the first best of 7 series in W history went to 7 games. So that's kind of what I'm rooting for. I'm not sure if I have a specific team that I prefer over the other here. I know there's the whole thing with DeWanna Bonner in Phoenix, and I know a lot of Fever fans would probably be rooting against her, but I think a lot of Fever fans, it's because of bitterness or whatnot or whatever it is, probably will be rooting against the Aces as well. So I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I am going to pick here for the Aces to win it in 6, but I don't feel strongly about it. So do not bash me if I'm wrong, if and when I'm wrong, I should say. All right, let's get into this Napheesa Collier. I don't want to call it a rant, but this statement she had at the Minnesota Lynx exit interviews. For those of you who don't know, I talked about it earlier in game 3 of the Lynx Mercury series. Late in that game, Napheesa Collier appeared to have gotten fouled by Alyssa Thomas. Alyssa Thomas obviously has a reputation as a very good defender, but as a very physical defender, and depending on who you ask, a very dirty defender. And she gets away with a steal and suffers an ankle injury. The reports were she probably wouldn't have even been able to return had the Lynx made the finals. But that's in game 3. The Mercury go on to win game 4 to win the series. Cheryl Reeve, Minnesota's coach, goes berserk and gets suspended from that game 4. So they were without their coach and their best player, right? Their MVP caliber player in game 4 as the Mercury won to advance to the finals. And so then at the rest of the exit interviews, Napheesa Collier kind of states like, hey, this isn't about bitterness. This isn't about the fact that we lost or won or didn't win the game or whatever. But she just talks about how there hasn't been enough transparency from the refs and the officials. And, of course, the fact that there's not been a very good line of communications between WNBA players and the league office. So there's this animosity that clearly exists between the Players Association and Cathy Engelbert, the league's front office as a whole. And you saw that at the All-Star break where they wore the pay us what we're worth shirts and all that stuff and everything. And so Fee just laid a lot of things out. And she just talked about the fact that, the league hasn't been very open in communications. And she was hoping that these things would be covered and kind of figured out behind the scenes. But because they haven't, she felt the willingness and the need to say it directly at this press conference. My thoughts are, I love the directness, right? It is clear now at this point that the CBA negotiations have been tiring and that these players really feel like their concerns or anything they have to say really been alleviated or taken seriously. And for those of you who didn't see, Caitlin Clark was directly mentioned in this Napheesa Collier statement, as Napheesa Collier went on to say, hey, why is it that these rookie contracts, these players who are bringing in so much to the league, like Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and Paige Beckers, are being paid these very small portions by the league as far as what their actual contracts are? And according to Napheesa Collier, once again, I wasn't there, obviously, and I don't know what's true and what's not. But according to Fee, she says that Cathy Engelbert, certainly exactly said that these players should be grateful that the league is giving them this opportunity to make all the money that they are making off of the court. And that just sat with me the wrong way. I'm sure that sat with Caitlin Clark the wrong way. She just spoke, as we're talking, an hour or two ago at the Fever's exit interviews and said she had never heard that story before and that Napheesa Collier hadn't really told her that she was going to be mentioned in this speech or whatnot. But to me, it's kind of concerning. The WNBA did release a statement about this, but what Fee said in her statement and in her press conference was not denied by Cathy Engelbert. And that, to me, is a little bit concerning, right? The fact that there's no sort of denying or anything of that. It's just the statement didn't really kind of oppose what Fee said and more so just said, hey, we're looking toward a solution. And for me, this all makes me concerned that there might not be a 2026 season, or at least not a full one. I guess the good thing is they have time, is what I'd say. There's a lot of time between now. It's just now the start of October and when the league typically starts in May. But right now, it just doesn't really look like a 2026 season is something that everybody's excited for. And once again, this could change. This is going to be an evolving story as the offseason goes on, but it feels like these two sides are so far apart. You got so many people at this point kind of calling for Cathy to resign. I'm not sure if she will. I don't know how her headspace is after hearing all these things. She'll have to give out this trophy to whoever wins this final series in a couple weeks. I'm sure that when she takes that podium post game, the boos will be raining in on her, whether that's in Phoenix or in Vegas, right? Like, funny thing is, it feels like the whole league and all the fans are now united in the fact that they want Cathy gone, or they're upset with the way that Cathy has run things. It's even to the point where today at the Fever exit interviews, Kelsey Mitchell was asked about, hey, returning to this team, her expiring contract, and she flat out said, I hope we've got a league. Like, that was a direct quote from Kelsey Mitchell. She doesn't seem all too sure or confident in the fact that they'll be playing or have the CBA and whatnot sorted out. And that's a big thing for a free agent, because you're going to wait to sign a contract before you know the CBA, as a big part of these negotiations right now with the CBA is about what percentage of revenue the players are getting. Right now, they're not getting an equal revenue percentage to what we've seen across other pro sports leagues. And as Napheesa Collier said, part of the WNBA's claim has been about sustainability when it comes to upping those salary percentages and whatnot. But I just don't feel like it is being looked at and treated how a league of this stature should be. And for those of you who don't know, Napheesa Collier is a player and a big part of Unrivaled, the 3-on-3 offseason league that was created last year. Her husband is in charge of that league. And so Napheesa Collier, at one point in this speech, says, unfortunately for them, speaking about the WNBA, right, I know what it takes to run a league. And that's like, Alex Basil runs that league, and that's kind of just like, whoa, like the fact that she said that, and the fact that she kind of looked at them and said, hey, a few years ago, right, maybe they could have gotten this past someone like Napheesa Collier, who has always been smart, but obviously wasn't really around the league or in charge of running the league. Now she knows what that takes and what that looks like, and she doesn't seem to really want to put up with the way that the WNBA has gone about things. So again, it's just a really messy situation that I feel like the details are going to get worse and worse before they get better. And that's not me saying they won't get better. I think they will eventually. But I feel like the things we hear about these meetings and about what the she said, kind of back and forth, whatever it may be, I think those things are only going to continue here. So I don't know what the solution is. I don't know how this is all going to go down. I wish I knew. I wish I could give you an answer or some sort of hint or clue or anything, but I have no real insight about how this will work. I do know that it will take some time, and that I'm not completely sure. I even tweeted it halfway jokingly, halfway seriously. Like, are we so sure that we are getting a 2026 WNBA season? Because I don't know if we are, or I'm not sure we're getting a full one. So until this all gets kind of sorted out, I'm hesitant to talk too big picture about the Fever, too much about 2026, because we don't know how this will look, but I will definitely keep tabs on that. But that's all I got for today. Thank you so much for listening. Of course, another episode of Right Up Meridian presented by the Back Home Network. Make sure to check out many other of our Back Home Network podcasts: Crimson Cast, Football Weather, Big Red Carpet, Sideline Stories. IU basketball is getting back into the swing of things. I've been writing about that, so that means Assembly Call, they should be doing a lot of work soon. So make sure to tune into all those shows. Once again, we'll get back to the Pacers talk here soon. Now that the Fever season is open, we'll be back in the Pacers talk. Pacers getting back to training camp. The media day festivities kind of began this week, so we'll have that for you here soon. But I've been Zion Brown. Thank you for listening to another episode of Right Up Meridian.